Hello gang, Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I have a collection of some of the strangest and most disturbing unidentified cryptid reports that I've ever received. Now remember, these are real stories from real people, and they are seeking answers and solace from their disturbing encounters, so please, comment your theories, but keep it respectful to the witnesses. So if you're ready, grab your gear and let's ride. Number 1. Dear Tattooed, I live in Iowa near Sioux City, and several nights ago, at about 1 a.m., I heard a very loud noise outside that I've never heard before. I walked out about 2 feet from my front door and was looking around, and then a scream and gurgling. It was so loud that it scared the crap out of me. It sounded like it was coming from the top of the pole. I went back in to get my phone and tried to record it. I was shaking so bad that all I got was something grainy, but it was something bluish that looked like a huge moth. And then there was that scream again. I ran inside, shut the doors, and collected myself while trying to watch out my front window. I thought I saw a shadow, and a very big one at that, move through the air to the left. It was so loud that I was afraid to walk under the light and try to film it. It sounded big enough to hurt someone. About 10 minutes or so later, I heard it again, only this time southwest of me. I'm guessing about 2 blocks away. I can't believe that no one woke up to this. I told my family, and even that night I told a few people online. It was one of 2 things. Something that these towers and frequency can do, or it was something that was really there. I've personally never heard anything make a noise that loud, at least not anything alive. I believe completely in the Bible, and I've still never seen it on YouTube or anywhere else yet. I've never been more rattled. I sincerely believe that, just like the Bible says, that we're in the end times, and that it'll be worse than Noah's and Lot's time combined. Thanks for reading. Signed, Joseph. Number 2. Hey Biker, I'd like to share a story that happened back when I was a teen and camping with my Boy Scout troop. This was back in probably 2011 or so. We were in Bald Eagle State Forest in Union County, Pennsylvania. A nice campsite area with cabins, but undeveloped forest for miles outside of the cleared areas. One night, we went on some sort of candlelight walk. Huge single-file line, and all the troops are together. I remember feeling like I just had to look at this thing, like I was compelled by nature itself. When I looked over, there was this tall, probably 6 foot tall, bunny man. That's the best way I know how to describe it. It had this really malevolent, twisted face and a pair of really long ears, like if a skinny and grown man was wearing the suit from Donnie Darko. It was gray and wearing a jacket, and it was walking with this really unnatural gait where it seemed to be making conscious decisions to independently move its muscles. Almost like whatever it was trying to imitate human movement. It was all very unnatural and surreal, and for the brief 5 or 10 seconds that I watched it, I just had this awful feeling that something was terribly wrong. I looked away for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me, and when I looked back to where I saw it, it was just gone. This was a very moonlit night, and with the candles and torches, you could see out quite a bit before things got dark. Now, I've never mentioned this story to anyone till now. Looking back, it was probably just some nut job, looking to terrify some kids out on a scouting trip. However, I just still remember how wrong the whole thing seemed. It could only be described as uncanny and definitely unnatural. Signed, Levi. Number 3. Dear TB, I decided to contact you about an unexplained experience I had along with my friend about 3 years ago. This was something that I had a really hard time coming to grips with, and it happened when I was 16 years old. I lived in the suburbs of Houston, Texas. It was a nice and bustling area, and I was always around people, whether in the apartment complex I was in or just going about my day. I was never truly alone. I had a good friend I still frequently talk to. Let's call her Sarah. Her grandmother lived in Louisiana, and I had never been one for long road trips, but I thought having a nice girls' weekend with her would be fun. And I would bite the bullet and try to enjoy myself for this car ride with her parents, me and her in an old minivan. Now, her grandma wasn't the nicest, but she liked me well enough, I think. We were out in the middle of the woods. She was extremely close to the Kitska National Forest, so the homes were spread far apart and the woods were vast. The middle of nowhere, in fact. Her grandma had a thing for people being too close to her, so my friend and I were out in the woods, playing and exploring these dense woods behind her property. There was a nice creek, and the trees seemed to muffle the outside world. Birds were chirping, and we saw lots of wildlife, lizards, squirrels, chipmunks. This forest was absolutely crawling with life. It was amazing. We must have been out there for at least 2 hours because as the sun started setting, we started to get antsy to return. Now, her grandma had a huge property. She enjoyed her space, and you gotta understand, there were no houses or neighbors beside her. She had basically spent a fortune on her space. So anyway, we started back and followed the winding creek back up to her house since it was vertical to her place. There was a noise behind us. It sounded like a dog or wolf. I stopped, and my friend did too, and we just listened. The noise continued. There's nothing more terrifying than absolute silence and actually hearing something behind you that's following you. We were a ways away, but we were both frozen in fear. I was expecting it was a coyote or some wild dog, but as the footsteps from the dark grew closer, I could hear ragged breath that sounded less dog and almost human. It started off quiet, but it grew louder and almost ravenous as it got closer. I slowly turned around as my vision adjusted to the dark, and now it sounded like something was dragging its legs through the leaves, and then it stopped. There was more silence. Absolutely nothing. No sounds, no panting, nothing. We were both petrified. We were scared now to move an inch because whatever it was that close. It would have surely outrun us and take us. Then we heard the most bizarre sound. It was a deep and long moan, but it took us both by surprise. I managed to take a quick look at whatever it was. The sound was coming from a tree, a couple of feet from my friend, and I saw it. One hand was gripping the tree, and through the dusk, I could see paper pale skin in its eyes. I'll never forget those eyes. They were wide and the mouth was gaping open like a dead fish. I didn't have time to analyze if it was a woman or a man, demon, or whatever it was. I just wanted to get out of those woods. The sound stopped as I locked eyes with it, and I felt my heart stop. My friend managed to tear herself out of the trance that we were both in, and she grabbed my arm, and we booked it. We both started screaming and yelling to hopefully scare whatever it was away. Neither of us heard any noises behind us, since we were so pumped with adrenaline, running and screaming, just running and screaming, and we didn't stop until we slammed the back door behind us and locked it. Not 10 minutes after we got back, I demanded to go back home, and my friend was just as shaken up since both of us refused to stay in that house. So we ended up getting a hotel at a nice nearby place, and I left the next day. I tried to be in a good mood the rest of the time I was there, and honestly, it was a great trip, other than that walk in the woods. Her grandmother actually died just 2 weeks after we left. Being alone on this crazy big property like she was on, I was surprised a neighbor from a few miles away came to check on her. We are not sure how she died, but my friend and I still have our suspicions, and still do. Signed, Anonymous. Number 4. Hello, TB. My daughter and I used to regularly see what we called a hide behind from my kitchen window. We were living in northeastern Iowa, near the Mississippi River at the time, and what we saw was 7 to 8 feet tall, bipedal, with muscular arms and legs, and definitely humanoid. It was pale and hairless. It would lean out from behind a tree in the forest behind our house. If you moved about, it would pop back behind the tree. We never saw more than one at a time, but there seemed to be more than one, as the height seemed to vary. We sometimes saw it multiple times a day, but the behavior was always the same. It seemed wary of us, but if we stayed out of sight, then it would lean out into view for a few seconds at a time. When we sent the dog out, it would run off into the forest after it, but never chased it into view, so that told us nothing. I viewed it through a rifle scope once and got a good, long look at it, silhouetted against the snow behind the trees. It was really creepy, like a Slender Man or something. I could determine the height by going out and measuring the trees that we saw it next to. I, of course, didn't shoot it, since you shouldn't shoot what you can't identify, and the only large bipeds hereabouts are people, though nothing human is that tall or slender. Now, we knew the local legends, and this matched the description and behavior. We dug out our trail camera, but the mysterious being has never been recorded. I tried to take photographs of it, but when I thought I'd captured it on my camera, nothing was ever there. That was 5 years ago, and we've since moved away and now live in Alabama. Thanks. Signed, Hazel. Number 5. Hi, Tattooed. I wanted to share this with you. Maybe you or your viewers can tell me what we encountered. My husband and I were driving over a viaduct at around 50 miles per hour one night, around 10:30 p.m. in November of 2018, near Southgate, Michigan. I was in the passenger seat. He was driving. There were other cars around us, but not heavy traffic. Anyway, I suddenly see this thing, which kind of looked like a cross between a gnome and a dwarf with long arms, hanging well past his knees. He walked right in front of our car from the right, going to the left. I couldn't understand how and why we didn't hit it. I sat there shocked for a second, and then I saw my husband shoot up in his seat, looking in the rearview mirror. And that's when he said, "What was that?" He started telling me exactly what he saw, and it was exactly the same thing I saw, but he saw it directly in front of him, still going left, and then he saw it behind us, and the car behind us reacted to it as well, but they swerved to avoid it. This thing was about 3 feet tall, very gruff and stubby looking, with gnarly and thick features. It was human-like, and had a hat on, a maroon vest, and a brownish pair of short pants. I couldn't see the feet. The moment I saw it, it was inches from the right end of our car. We should have hit it. My husband saw it like a split second later, but it was in front of him, on the driver's side. Since that night, I still don't know what it was. Any ideas? Signed, Caroline. Number 6. Dear Tattooed Biker, this happened on May 11th, 2019, on my way home from work. Now, I live in Central Texas, San Antonio to be exact, and this whole incident happened in the span of maybe 30 to 45 seconds, maybe a minute, but it felt pretty quick, and absolutely surreal. I was driving on a short stretch of elevated highway, the Parkway, if you know the city, traveling northbound between 281, cutting over to 35. I was passing the airport, just past Thousand Oaks, where the highway straightens out for a few miles until it slopes to ground level. It was raining, and there were not many streetlights on this part of the highway. I was going 60 to 65 miles per hour, and my car is a little sedan, so I had a low view of the road. I was the only one on the highway in either direction, aside from a pair of headlights several miles behind me. In the distance ahead, maybe half a mile or so, I saw what looked like a man, running or jogging on the right-hand shoulder of the road. Aside it being nearly 1 a.m., and on an elevated stretch of road, I didn't think it was too odd. There are lots of drunks in my city, and strange things have happened. Nonetheless, I moved from the right lane to the left, just in case. As I approached it, I became more aware that the silhouette wasn't getting taller, as you would expect as your perception shifts. Instead, it stayed the same height. I estimate maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, based on the fact that its head came to about the same height as the hood of my car. I slowed down to around 50 or 55 and stared at the back of this thing, trying to make out details through my rain-soaked windshield. As I got close enough for this thing to be fully in my headlights, it suddenly dropped down to all fours, as if it was trying to mimic an animal. Now I know this wasn't any animal that I've ever seen. Its size was that of a medium-sized coyote, but it was running distinctly like a person that was attempting to run like an animal. Its hindquarters were raised up in the air, and I could clearly make out buttocks, and its legs kicked out sideways when they came back. If you've ever seen documentaries about feral children, then you know the gait that I'm attempting to describe. The only thing is that no human could ever run on all fours at the speed that this thing was going. The creature was entirely naked and oily black and smooth. The rain glistened off of it, like a shine off wet marble or obsidian. I could make out muscle tone and everything as this thing just clipped along. As it dropped to 2 legs, it lost some speed, either intentionally or just from the change of gait. It was running about the same pace as a person could sprint before. I passed this thing, and it looked over its left shoulder towards me. Its face was flat, with a flat, wide nose. It had huge eyes, and I could see the whites and dilated dark pupils. There was no eye shine, which I still think is unusual. Just those eyes against the black of its skin, though it never looked directly in my headlight beams, so that detail may not matter. It opened its mouth at one point as it was looking at me as I passed. Its teeth were flat and white like a human's, but with much, much larger and very prominent canines. It had hands and feet like a person, but I couldn't make out any genitalia. But it was distinctly male in its general appearance. It would be best described as having a swimmer's build. Its body was proportionate to that of any other human, just really scaled down. No crazy long limbs or anything like that. I fumbled with my phone with the intent to try and take a photo, but I was so enamored and terrified, and trying to take in as much detail as possible while driving on a dark, rainy road. I also didn't think a photo would show much because, well, dark, rain, and the glass on my car windows. But now I'm seriously thinking of getting a dash cam. I hope that the car a ways behind me saw this thing too. I hope I provided enough detail for an accurate report. I have no idea what I just saw, but I'm kind of glad I saw it. It's good to know what's really out there. It looked like it wasn't happy to be out there and just wanted to get off the highway. I got the very distinct impression that the only reason it dropped down to all fours was in an attempt to mimic an animal and maybe draw less attention to itself. It didn't have far to go to the exit, but there was a well-lit gas station and an intersection there. Aside from a few apartment buildings and scattered industrial areas, the only other stuff along this stretch is a small amusement park and the airport. There is an old abandoned concrete plant in the area next to the highway. Again, if you're local, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. That was my first thought as to where it could have come from, and that it was heading away from this, though, and towards a populated area, so it doesn't make much sense. I'm still just floored that I ever saw this thing, and I'm totally open to providing more detail, but I believe this to be pretty concise. Signed, Lamar. Quick narrator's note here. Since he offered to provide more detail, I gave it a shot and contacted Lamar. Here's what he said in his follow-up email. Hey, Biker. To be honest, I couldn't make out much more detail, just what I described. Its height, gait, color, and the fact that it had muscle tone. Aside from when it turned its head, all I really saw was white eyes and its teeth. The whole thing happened pretty quickly. As I got close enough to pass it, it turned its face towards me, so I couldn't make out a profile. This thing was dark, impossibly black, and I honestly don't remember being able to make out the nose or ears. I'm sure they were there, though. As I said, it looked like a person, just scaled down and, well, evil. Signed, Lamar. And there it is. All I have for tonight. 6 true reports of strange and unidentified cryptids. I really appreciate you taking this strange ride with me tonight. And if you haven't subscribed already, well, you made it this far, so you might as well. Anyways, thanks again. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.